Welcome to Athens Happens. I'm Ben Peters, managing editor at The New Political. Athens Happens is a weekly news podcast brought to you by reporters at TNP who are dedicated to explaining the nuances of Athens and state politics. You can find new episodes every Friday at thenewpolitical.com, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, SoundCloud, or wherever else podcasts can be downloaded. This week, a 27-year-old Democrat from Central Ohio is running to represent Athens in Congress. If elected, he could become the first openly gay member of Ohio's congressional delegation. And Athens' years-long history of mostly uncontested elections, resulting in a local government perpetually controlled almost entirely by Democrats. Staff writer Zach Zimmerman on a Central Ohio native who's running to represent Ohio's 15th congressional district, a district he doesn't live inside of. How are you, Mr. Zimmerman?
I'm doing all right. How are you, Ben?
I'm good. So who is this congressional candidate who you spoke with this past week?
So Daniel Kilgore is a 27-year-old Democrat. He previously volunteered for the Clinton campaign in 2016. He lives in Whitehall, which is outside of Columbus. Like you said, it is not part of the 15th district. He works at a call center for a credit card company, so he does not have any prior political experience other than volunteering.
So this guy is running for Congress to represent this district, which includes most of Athens County and the city of Athens, and he's not from inside the district. Is that legal?
So the requirements are that you are at least 25 years old, you have been a citizen of the United States for at least the past 7 years, and you live in the state that you represent. So there's nothing really that states it is illegal for him to run for the 15th district because he does live in Ohio.
Okay, gotcha. And so what did you take away from this call you had with him? You said you're on the phone with him for about an hour and a half. What did you learn about this man?
So he seems to be a very progressive candidate, or at least that is what he is trying to be. Mm-hmm. His main concerns, he has said, are jobs, poverty, and climate change. He went on for a while about climate change and how it's really not that complicated of an issue. You look around, we're in Ohio, it's January, there should be 6 or 7 inches of snow on the ground right now. And the day we had interviewed, the previous day, it was 75 degrees out, so that's not normal. His other issue is jobs. He has, mentioned ideas such as building a new public rail transit all across the state of Ohio,
like a metro system or a subway system.
What he said was a public rail system, like Chicago or New York City, and it would connect, Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati, and there'd also be stops throughout the more rural parts of Ohio.
So kind of like the Amtrak.
Yes.
I see.
Yeah, and he's very big on creating jobs and combating poverty, which is obviously an issue in Ohio. He talked about how within the 15th district, you look at Athens County has around a 30% poverty rate. Vinton County has over 20%, and there's 2 others with around 19. So he's very concerned about poverty.
Right. So again, he's not from the district. Did he explain to you how his connection to it, why he feels like he is the guy to represent this district and to beat Steve Stiver in a general election?
He did not, and it's pretty interesting. He's going up against Joel Newby
in the primary.
Yeah. Who, given he also lives in Columbus, he's spent his entire life around the 15th district and the counties that make it up. So it should be interesting to see how the primary turns out, Kilgore wants to run what seems to be a progressive campaign, and he believes he can win over voters. It should be interesting to see if he can win over these voters, given he doesn't live in the 15th district. He has said, when I asked him about how he can appeal to college students, obviously that question it was asked given the large population of students here at Ohio University. He believes he can appeal to students in the district. He went to film school and he had to drop out because he said he ran out of student aid. So he understands a lot of the struggles that younger people go through. Has said that, he's 27 years old and he doesn't make much money. He's often had to work 2 jobs at once, and he's running against Steve Stivers, who Mr. Kilgore claims has a net worth of around $1.5 million. So it should be interesting to see if he is able to appeal to the voters of this district.
So it sounds like a lot of his campaign is running on the coattails of his personal experience, and he thinks that those experiences he's had, he can communicate those to voters rather than somebody who like Joel Newby, who's lived here his whole life, and he knows this area, he knows this district, he knows what these people have gone through because he's seen it. Whereas Kilgore sounds like he's had these experiences, but in a different context.
Yeah, I think so. He's very big on just being himself. With that being said, one of the biggest things to note is that if he were to be elected, he would be the first openly gay member of Congress from Ohio. Now, he is big on being himself. He wants to be open-minded to all voters, but he's also big on, when he was younger, there's this perception that, a gay person couldn't, be a member of Congress. And,
right.
He's doing this for the kids that are growing up now, and he wants to be able to show them that yes, you can do this. So he's very big on being himself. He thinks that will work.
Why did he decide that he was the guy for the job?
He's been through a lot, or so he says, and Mr. Stivers, he's very Mr. Kilgore is very adamant about, Mr. Stivers has, this big net worth. He doesn't truly understand the 15th district. And it's interesting, he's running against Mr. Newby. And when I asked them about any, big differences he has with not only Mr. Stivers, but Mr. Newby
his
as
primary
well.
opponent.
Correct.
Yeah.
He didn't really get into it that much. He said there are differences between him and Joel Newby. He didn't list any. And he said that he's not going to attack a fellow Democrat. And so he spent quite a while airing his grievances against Mr. Stivers.
I see. Did he indicate what sort of demographics he's trying to appeal to in this campaign? I know you mentioned that you asked him about students, but students only make up so much of the population in this district. It's a big district, goes all the way up to Columbus practically. Who is he trying to win over?
Well, I asked him about how he would appeal to all voters across this district. And, we discussed how in this day and age, polarization is a major issue. And again, he went on about how he believes, he can be himself and people will like that. And he talked about how when he was trying to gather signatures to be able to run for Congress, he talked with, Republican voters who, there's clear differences in opinion that they have, but, they're able to find some sort of common ground somewhere, and, they can go from there. He discusses how if he were making these decisions, he's open to all opinions, and, he's going to look for solutions regardless of what party you're from. So on top of all that, he's trying to be himself to win over voters. And I think it's worth noting, he's talked about how he's only 27, student debt is crushing him. He's had to work multiple jobs at the same time, and poverty is clearly an issue in this district. So I do think that is a major issue that he will try and focus on.
So it sounds a lot like what he's saying is that he wants to reach across the aisle, try to find consensus among Democrats and Republicans in Congress if he were to be elected. But you also mentioned the fact that he identifies himself as a progressive. Did he list any specific progressive policy platforms that he's running on?
He's a supporter of Medicare For All. He's talked about how if you do the math, at the end of the day, you would save money in your overall spending on health care if you had Medicare For All as opposed to the current system. Yeah, you may have to spend $75 extra in taxes, but you would save over $2,000.
Were those figures that he gave you?
He gave them, yeah. So that's a big progressive issue that he's running on. He also mentioned that he wants a Green New Deal. He thinks that is important. He's talked about how scientists have warned us for the past 30 years on climate change, and we are just now worried about it. So he's a believer in the Green New Deal. So there are some clear progressive points that he mentions, along with being open to bipartisanship.
So it's interesting to me because a lot of members of Congress consider a Medicare for All or a Green New Deal to be very extreme, and a lot of voters do too, particularly the Green New Deal. Medicare for All, polling shows it's a little bit more popular. But I'm interested in how, did he indicate in any way of how he would actually work across bipartisan lines to pass something like a Medicare for All bill?
He didn't really get into specifics other than, he's open to listening to all voters, all, members of Congress that he would work with if elected. If he has said if he were to only listen to Democrats, he would get nowhere. And there may be solutions and ideas that a Republican may have that he says he wasn't even aware of that, could be the key idea to, solve it. So he's not really giving specifics, but at the same time, he harps on this idea how he's, open to listening to all, which is very similar to what Mr. Newby has said previously about being open to listening to all voters, regardless of political affiliation.
I see. Were there any other interesting bits that you guys talked about?
So he is running in large part because previously his grandmother had urged him to run in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And he realized that that was not possible for him. Just he was extremely busy at the time, working multiple jobs and such. But he eventually promised that he would run in 2020. Unfortunately, shortly after that conversation, his grandmother passed away. So he's doing this to fulfill the promise that he made for his grandmother. She was very supportive of him and would tell him, look, you know what you're talking about. So.
Interesting. Anything else about him?
It should be interesting to see how the primary election goes against Mr. Newby.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see what happens, especially with the fact that he doesn't actually live in the 15th district, and that's a big part of Mr. Newby's campaign, that he has spent a lot of his life in the 15th district. It'll be interesting to see how Mr. Kilgore does. He's big on the climate change stuff. He's big on the poverty in this district. So it'll be interesting to see how he does.
The primary is March 17th.
Correct.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Zach. We really appreciate you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Up next, digital editor Tim Zelina is going to talk about Athens electoral history.
Hey Athens Happens listeners, Sarah Donaldson here. I'm the digital managing editor at The New Political. I just wanted to jump on and say that TNP has truly shaped my college experience. When I joined as a staff reporter a year and a half ago, I never would have imagined myself gaining so much professional experience or meeting so many close friends. We're an award-winning, independent, nonpartisan publication run entirely by students at Ohio University, and we're dedicated to providing solid coverage of campus, city, and state politics. But we don't just do news and opinion writing. In a field that is constantly changing and evolving, journalists are expected to do it all. We teach you how to do that at TNP. We regularly produce photo galleries, videos, podcasts like the one you're listening to, infographics, and so much more. And if you're interested in social media or public relations, there's a spot on our team for you, too. The clips you'll produce here will help you get the internship you want. By the end of my freshman year, I had multiple pieces of writing published on TNP's website, allowing me to pursue an internship at my local paper, the Butler Eagle, last summer. I've also met some of my best friends here at TNP, and we have a fantastic network of alumni working in journalism and strategic communications jobs as close as Athens or as far as New York City. If you have yet to find the student publication on campus that's the right fit, The New Political just might be the one for you. Our weekly all-staff meetings are held every Sunday night at 7 p.m. in Scripps Hall if you're interested in joining, and you can also reach out to me at sdonaldson@thenewpolitical.com.
Digital editor Tim Zelina on why Athens' blue wall of Democrats, which kept out numerous independent challengers in the city's 2019 mayoral and city council elections, shows no signs of abating anytime soon. How are you, Tim?
I'm doing great, Ben. How are you doing?
I'm excellent. Thank you so much for asking. So you spent a few weeks ago, you went and you looked through for the New Political's winter magazine. You did a story about electoral history in Athens, and you looked through elections for how many years?
Since the year 2001.
And what did you find from looking at these elections and their results?
So the elections are held in off-number years, so 2001, 2003, and so on. And the early elections were generally pretty competitive.
Mm-hmm.
But in 2005 and 2007, the last Republican serving in office got voted out. And ever since then, almost nobody who is not a Democrat has been elected to Athens city government. Patrick McGee in 2015 was elected as an independent, and he served 2 terms and then was voted out in 2019, last year.
Yeah.
And so what we have is a city government that is almost solidly blue, and what's kind of troubling is that, to some people anyway, is that the Democratic primaries are never very contested. You might get an occasional primary every couple years. Arian Smedley and Sam Miller duked it out 2 years ago. But for the most part, the primaries, there's generally a single candidate on the ticket or on the ballot. That candidate gets the nomination without any, contesters, and then that candidate generally wins election. It's not a very surprising or competitive electoral scene here.
So what marked in the early 2000s, what marked that shift between elections being competitive to not so competitive?
I can't really say for sure. All I could see was that around 2005, there was a Republican congressman. I'm blanking on his name, or not congressman, councilman. I'm blanking on his name right now, but he got voted out. And then in 2007, there was the Republican law director, and he also got voted out. And this is around the same time, if you look nationally, where there was a lot of backlash to the Bush administration.
Yeah.
So especially in a college town like this during the Iraq War, there may have been a lot of angst surrounding that. But since then, even with Republican wave years in the middle of the 2010s, we haven't seen Republicans return to government or even really run. I mean, the last Republican to run was probably 10, 12 years ago.
And why are none of these Democrats primaried ever?
The Athens Democratic Party is very tight-knit. It's a very local party. They all know each other. They work together with the Athens College Democrats. And so I believe that the party is not really looking to muddle up the elections, that they are generally letting people serve out their time in office, and then when they either move on to another office or resign, that is when an opening is sort of like viewed as acceptable to go for. But otherwise, most of the primary challengers have either been people not necessarily affiliated with the county party itself. They may be, registered as Democrats, but they are not, like with the county party. Or it is somebody like Sam Miller, who was the Athens College Dem president, and she was running against Arian Smedley, who was also going for the open seat that one of the councilmen who resigned recently,
right,
his seat,
retired. So you, in your story, you called this a blue wall. Can you explain the origin of that term, what it means?
So the term blue wall, if you hear it, it's generally referring to a few states in the Rust Belt, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, which generally vote solidly Democrat, and for a long time were sort of like the keys to a Democrat winning national office. It was a foundation, for successful Democratic campaigns. And so the term sort of refers to how Republicans could, try as hard as they wanted to win these states, because they are states that are purple at the state level, but they would still generally almost always go Democrat. So in Athens, Ohio, I think we have a similar blue wall where it's virtually impossible for anyone who isn't a Democrat to win office. And if they do win office, it's generally one of the at-large seats.
And it's short-lived.
Yes, it's very short-lived. Usually a term or two.
So what is the current makeup of the city government right now in terms of partisan makeup, I should say?
So right now it is all Democratic. The mayor is Democratic. The city law director is Democratic. All the council seats are Democratic. So it is an entirely Democratic city government, at least in the electoral seats. I can't tell about any appointed or bureaucratic seats, but the elected seats are all Democrat.
Interesting. And so how does that compare to the city historically? I mean, even going back past the early 2000s. Did you research that at all?
So Athens does not actually host. So on their website, they have the ballot results going back to 2000, but they don't host prior to that. So I wasn't able to look at how competitive the city was before 2000.
Is there a particular position in the city government that is often the most contested or more contested than others?
Yeah, so the at-large seats are generally where the big races are. When I wrote my article, I counted the at-large race as a single race because there are 3 seats available, but it is one, sort of seat on the ballot. You vote for 3 people, but it's a single race.
The at-large city council race.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And so beyond that, the city law director was contested for a while. It used to be Republican till about 2007. But that's about it. I mean, even the mayor, the last time the mayor was challenged was in 2003 or 2001. And
Before last year?
yes, before last year, mind you, where
Gotcha.
Damon Crane challenged Steve Patterson. So, in that, Steve Patterson sort of blew away Damon Crane.
Yeah,
So
I mean, it wasn't
it
even
really,
close.
yeah, it wasn't really much of a competitive race, though his name was on the ballot. So,
Is there anything else you'd like to add, Tim?
I just would like to add that, for as much as we can say this is democratic, you do have to acknowledge that Athens is a heavily democratic city, that people are not barred from running for office. If
Mhm.
you and I could sign up right now and file for office if we could get the signatures.
Mm-hmm.
So when we say these elections aren't entirely democratic, we don't mean that Athens Democrats are rigging them or that there's not open opportunity to run. It's just that the political scene seems to discourage any challengers. It's very solidly blue. The sort of powerful players in the city, I guess you could say, are generally supportive of whoever the Democratic Party endorses.
Mm-hmm.
And so any challenger has a insanely difficult time, making a serious jump for the office.
Unless they're a Democratic challenger.
Yeah.
Like, Beth Clodfelter had a ton of support from the county party, the city party.
College Dems loved her.
Yeah.
She was.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much, Tim. We appreciate you a lot.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me on.
And that wraps it up here on Athens Happens. Make sure to tune in every Friday for new episodes that shed light on the politics that impact all of our lives. Remember, you can find the show on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and on YouTube in a video podcast format. Don't forget to leave us ratings and reviews. Also, be sure to check out our website at thenewpolitical.com, where we regularly report stories on what really happens here in Athens, and follow @thenewpolitical on social media. Thank you all so much. Have a great weekend.